Good evening. I'm Laura Ladd-Bierman, Executive Director of the League of Women Voters of New York State, representing 50 local leagues and 4,000 members across New York State. As a reminder, the League of Women Voters is nonpartisan and never supports or opposes any candidate or political party. We are pleased to be organizing tonight's debate, and we are greatly appreciative of the help and support from the College of St. Rose for the facility, operations, and live streaming of this event. All candidates appearing on the ballot for the office of New York State Governor were invited to attend tonight's debate. Thank you to the 4 of you who agreed to participate. And to allow the public to hear directly from you about your vision for New York State.
I'm sorry, who's missing? Sorry.
The format for tonight's debate, as agreed to by all of the candidates, is as follows. There will be no opening statements. Questions will be asked by our esteemed media panelists, Susan Arbetter, Ken Lovett, Decorah McIntyre, and Josefa Velasquez. Follow-up questions are allowed, but will be limited to allow for more questions to be asked. Bios about these panelists are in your program. The candidates selected numbers prior to the debate to determine the order of responding. The order is as follows. Howie Hawkins will be first, Stephanie Miner is second, Larry Sharp is third, and Mark Molinaro is fourth. That order will rotate for each question based on this numbering. Each candidate will have 1 minute to respond to the question. There are league members in the front row who are the official timers for the evening. A yellow paddle will be raised when there's 30 seconds left, and a red paddle when the time has expired, and the candidate must stop his or her response. Each candidate also has at their podium 2 red cards. They may use these red cards during the debate to ask for 30 seconds more to offer a rebuttal or to increase time on a specific question. They are limited to 2 during the entire debate, however, and the time will be provided to them after all candidates have responded to that question. The additional time cannot be used during their closing statements. Candidates will also be allowed to present a 2-minute closing statement after the last question, with the next candidate starting the closing statements. The candidates and campaigns have also agreed to the following rules for the debate, and I am assured that all of you will follow these rules as well. There is absolutely no audio or videotaping allowed by any campaign staff or audience member. A league volunteer will ask anyone seen taping to stop. If the person does not stop, the debate will be interrupted until that person stops taping or is escorted out of the building. I also ask that there's no cheering, clapping, or booing during the debate. This activity takes time away from the debate, reducing the amount of questions and responses. And I think we can all agree we'd like to hear more from each of the candidates. An unruly audience member will be asked to leave, and if continues, will be escorted out of the venue. Finally, a table is in the entryway with campaign literature from the candidates' campaigns. There's no distributing these materials in the venue, but please feel free to pick up the materials on your way out. And before we start the questions, I would just like to ask each candidate to consider this debate as a discussion of ideas. Instead of criticizing another candidate for what he or she has or has not done, let's hear what your plans are to improve New York State if you're elected governor. A civil discourse on ideas would be a nice way to spend the evening. So let's get started. The questions have been grouped into different issue categories, and the first category is concerning economic development. And the first question will be asked by Josefa.
So this goes for Mr. Hawkins at first.
Right.
All across New York City, neighborhoods are continuing to gentrify and rents are skyrocketing. Yet in upstate New York, the economy is still sputtering, and cities upstate are failing to attract young people and young families. What are tangible ways to attract young people and diversify the struggling upstate community?
Yeah, young people, 1 million of them really have left the state since Governor Cuomo took office. And that's because the cost of living is too high and the jobs, a lot of them are crappy. So we've got to raise wages. We got to invest in the infrastructure that everybody uses and the public services that everybody uses. Fully fund the public schools. Go to 100% clean energy by 2030. That will create hundreds of thousands of good jobs in manufacturing and construction. And that can be done all over the state. We need to rebuild the subway system down in New York City. We need to expand mass transit upstate. We need to build public housing to deal with the affordability crisis. The rent is too damn high. Healthcare costs are going up. We need single-payer health care. Property taxes are too high. The state needs to pay for its mandates and then share the revenues like it used to so local government can provide good services. We got to fix our sewer and water systems. We have a water main break in
Thank you, Mr.
Syracuse
Hawkins.
almost every day.
Thank you. Ms. Minor?
This is an excellent segue, thank you, Howie, to water main breaks. We see that we have two different states here. All of the economic development, 89% is happening downstate. We have economic development programs that have been completely flawed and have not produced any sort of return on investment. We have to eliminate those economic development programs and the bureaucracy, take that money and invest it in infrastructure, traditional infrastructure like transit, roads, and bridges, but new infrastructure like modern broadband, so that we can have accessible, affordable access to the internet. This is how you grow an economy, is by building infrastructure systems that everyone can use, particularly young people.
Thank you, Ms. Minor. Mr. Sharp?
Yeah, you're going to hear a lot the word invest. Every time you hear the word invest, what you should hear is more of your taxes. Every time you hear invest, it means taxes. Everything I tell you will incur no extra taxation whatsoever. You want to make the poorer communities be resilient to gentrification? It's called ownership, and it's called supporting small business. The more ownership we have in poor communities, when they gentrify, they gain. That's what I want. Ownership in their housing, as Howie mentioned, ownership in their businesses by supporting small business. We have to stop bribing big business from coming to the state and instead support small business by doing things like making the taxation simpler, taking care of our workers' comp, making it so that if you're a small business that you sell only locally, you don't have to be in any way, shape, or form beholden to federal regulatory bodies, making it easier for small business, to include small farmers, letting small farmers be treated like small businesses. They get SBA loans. On top of that, why in the world aren't we encouraging things like Bitcoin, blockchain, hemp, cannabis? These are all new ideas that bring the youth back to our state. We do that, we win.
Thank you, Mr. Sharp, but hang on 1 minute, Mr. Molinaro. Josefa would like to do a follow-up.
Oh,
Mr.
please.
Sharp.
Yeah, so I just wanted to know, how would you specifically attract young families, young communities? You mentioned Bitcoin and all that, but what programs would you put in place?
You have
Yeah.
30 seconds.
Hold on, you said what programs would I put in
Or
place?
what sort of,
No, I'm a
what's your
libertarian, right?
policy?
Okay,
Yeah,
good.
well,
Just
what's
making
your
sure.
policy
You
for
said
that?
program. That's like garlic to a vampire. Anyway, so no, there's no program. What I want to do is I want to say instead, if you're a small business in New York State, I want to make sure licensing and regulations don't stop you. You know, there's a license in New York State to braid hair, a license to walk a dog. Who starts walking a dog and hair braiding businesses? People in poorer communities trying to get themselves back on track. When I was a kid in the Bronx or in the South Bronx,
Thank you,
that's what
Mr.
happened.
Sharp.
We do that, and we'll support them.
Mr. Molinaro, would you like the question repeated, or?
Sure, just to,
All right.
Josefa?
So all across New York City, rents are skyrocketing and neighborhoods have become completely gentrified, but upstate New York hasn't seen that happen. You see communities struggle to retain young people and attract young families. What would you do to ensure that New York State as a whole gets its fair share that New York City's having?
You have 1 minute.
first, upstate New York needs to be shown the respect of state government that it hasn't gotten for the last 8 years. And what that means is to make upstate New York more affordable. We start by property tax relief, significant property tax relief. Yes, that requires Albany and New York to pay for the costs that it shifts down onto local governments. But if we want to keep young people in the state of New York, we have to make sure that it's not only affordable, but we have job opportunities, housing opportunities. And what that means to us and to me is, as has been noted, instead of continuing to pay corporate interests, we ought to be investing in city, hamlet, and village centers. So that's infrastructure investment. Yes, it's broadband. Yes, it's water, sewer, streets, sidewalks. But in the same respect, it's ensuring that educational outcomes meet economic needs. So that's aligning SUNY and CUNY and community colleges with the economic goals of a region. and then working to ensure that we're growing the jobs necessary to keep kids here. 71% of 18 to 35-year-olds on Long Island say they're going to leave within 5 years. It is up to us to make New York affordable and to link our great assets with our struggling communities.
The next question will be posed by Ken Lovett and will be directed to Ms. Minor.
Ms. Minor, Governor Cuomo created the Regional Economic Development Councils that has different regions of the state competing for economic development money, millions of dollars worth. He's argued that different regions of the state have different needs and that the councils allow for local people to help shape what's best for them. Critics say it's a pork barrel program that's controlled by the governor instead of the legislature. What are all your thoughts on that, and would you continue the program if elected?
No, I wouldn't continue the program, and I know this firsthand. As the two-term mayor of the city of Syracuse, I have one of the poorest census tracts in the country. And I saw juxtaposed between poor people who needed help, these regional economic councils who just continued to give expensive tax benefits to people who, lo and behold, often were campaign contributors. But look at the data from the New York Federal Reserve to the Upjohn Institute. We have seen there has been no benefit from them, no data benefit at all, and yet we've also seen that they've been mired in corruption. We need to stop picking winners and losers, invest in infrastructure, invest in the things that communities need, like water, like sewer, like making sure that we have safe streets and safe bridges.
Thank you. Mr. Sharp.
You heard it. Invest, invest, invest. You heard it. Every time you hear invest, it means more taxes. That's not what I want to do. What I want to do instead is get rid of the REDCs. They are a bad idea. They are literally a petri dish for corruption. All of these boards and authorities and commissions, they are ways of avoiding responsibility and rewarding party loyalists and rewarding those who give people money. Look at all the people who've been arrested, indicted, all those people who've gone to jail. Every one of them. They're on some kind of board or commission or something like that. That terrible idea, they are a bad idea, get rid of them completely. Instead, why aren't we taking the time to not reduce taxes so that someone else gets it, but how about instead reduce spending? How about instead support our small businesses? If we do that, change licensing, you will find that everyone will grow.
Thank you. Mr. Molinaro?
End the Regional Economic Development Council model, stop cutting checks to corporate interests, and use our resources of state government to partner with local communities all across the state, not only to establish stronger municipal centers, but to ensure that communities are working together. New York's a home rule state, which means economic development and land use is decided by planning boards and zoning boards all across upstate New York and, of course, those within the city of New York. It's important that we use the technical support within the Comptroller's office and other agencies of state government to really provide the professional support necessary to help communities establish their economic development plans, establish zoning code that supports it, and then ensure that if we're putting dollars on the street, it's actually putting it on the street. Infrastructure, water, sewer, streets, sidewalks. And at the end of the day, communities in this state can't afford to make the necessary upgrades unless New York's a partner. But rather than Albany's economic development approach, which is the governor saying, this is my good idea, now compete to tell me why I'm right, this economic development model is top-down instead of from the bottom up.
Mr. Hawkins.
Yeah, I would shut down the Regional Economic Development Councils. People call them the Hunger Games.
Yes.
But in the end, every region got their money, and the pay-to-play contributors tended to be the people on the councils, and they slapped together proposals, and the money was awarded, but most of the projects have not been done. What we need to invest in is public infrastructure and public services, education, healthcare, and so forth, because those are the public avenues of private commerce on which private business can thrive, and it benefits everybody, not the pay-to-play contributors who are corrupt.
Thank you, Mr. Hawkins. The next question will be asked by Takora and will be directed to Mr. Sharp.
Mr. Sharp, upstate lawmakers will demand parity, meaning $30 million for upstate if downstate gets $30 million for transportation funding.
Please say that one more time, I'm sorry.
Okay. Upstate law.
That there are protections to combat workplace sexual harassment.
Well, the first thing is the law that was passed earlier this year needs to include the legislators. They tend to exempt themselves from laws. They need to broaden the definition of what harassment is, because it may not take account of people who are of non-binary status. So those are two changes immediately. We need independent ethics oversight. Jay Cope is appointed by the legislators. That's putting the fox in charge of the chicken house. And so we need an independent ethics oversight in the state. And I think we need to reopen the Moreland Commission on public corruption and look at sexual harassment and all the other things that have been going on.
Thank you. Ms. Minor?
Well, I would just say, Josefa, that Albany hasn't been unscathed. Behind Vito Lopez, Eric Schneiderman, Michael Boxley, legislators using taxpayer monies to pay off settlements, it's been very scathed. But what we have seen is a system that is so closed that it has not allowed hearings to happen, the culture to be examined, to have sunlight in there. Nobody has been held accountable for the terrible state of affairs that has existed in the Albany state legislature culture. And you have the current governor who it's come right up to his office with the Department of Corrections, settlements happening, people losing jobs and being demoted because of complaining about it. There needs to be hearings. The ultimate disinfectant is sunlight, and that's why I have stood up and said we need to stand with these victims and have hearings and expose the culture so we can change the culture once and for all.
Thank you. Mr. Sharp?
I think she's right. I want to piggyback off of that. The advantage of the Me Too movement, as horrible as it has been, is that it does shine a light on this issue. And I do want us to shine a light on the issue. We can't just punish. The goal has to be to stop the behavior. If you want to stop the behavior, you have to shine a light on it. So I think that's an important piece. We have to make sure that we do have due process, as always. Everyone is, of course, innocent until proven guilty, of course. But there has to be an accountability. So I love the ideas we brought up. I think we should be shining a light on them. We can't just focus on punishing. Because if we focus on punishing, people go to jail, and the behavior continues. We also can't stop accountability. It's just because His Majesty King Andrew II always says things like, nothing's been proven. Look, Donald Trump knew what was going on in 2013. What did Cuomo know? What did he know? He didn't know? Of course he did, and he's done nothing. Just because he hasn't been proven, that culture is his culture. He's the one who's made this happen.
Thank you, Mr. Sharp. Mr. Molinaro?
I was asked once if I would have my daughter intern in the New York State Legislature, and my answer was firmly and remains absolutely not. Albany is a cesspool of bad behavior, and powerful men have allowed it to continue without anyone holding anyone accountable. So Albany needs not only an ethics code, that ethics code needs to include a sexual harassment policy. And yes, there needs to be hearings that include testimony from victims, but more than hearings, we need to ensure the law is enforced, and yes, we ought to punish any man who thinks it's okay to take advantage of a woman. And this governor has allowed, in the Department of Criminal Justice Services, women who came forward to speak up with courage. He has allowed them to be dismissed or to work in a hall closet. It is disgusting. It is disgraceful. And at the end of the day, they need to be swept clean so that kids like my daughter could safely intern in the state capitol, where we should be celebrating the best behavior, not the ugliest.
Thank you, Mr. Molinaro. The next question will be asked by Takora, directed to Ms. Minor.
What legislation would your administration support or introduce to protect LGBT people from work and housing discrimination? And do you support trans-inclusive health care?
So,
Today, yes, we need to ease access to voter registration. We need to ease access to make it easier for voters to actually participate in the process. How about one primary date? How about a quicker and easier access to register? But yeah, we ought to be engaging in the real conversations with young people so that they understand that they have the power. I ran for office as an 18-year-old, not because I wanted a title, but because I knew my community wasn't responding to the needs of young people. So it means getting out from behind the podium and engaging in the conversation. Initiative and referendum. Have open town hall meetings. Let the public understand that they have the power. Yes, independent redistricting. Yes, making sure that voters are engaged in the decision making. And yes, make sure that legislators and elected officials don't get to stifle the voices of ordinary New Yorkers. Do all of those things, but be a leader. Go out into the community and engage in the dialogue.
Molinaro. The next question has to do with environmental issue, and Ken